looking at creating transformation parameters. This won't take long, but I just thought it was an interesting exercise. And one of the main reasons I want to talk to you about this is because I want to take you through an approach of how developing countries in particular could try and create transformation parameters. We've had a number of people come and do secondments with us in Australia and New Zealand over the years, where they were looking for ways to create these transformation parameters because they found this process technically quite challenging. And I've used CatRef, and Zahir got very frustrated, I think, trying to teach me how to use CatRef about 15 years ago when he came to Australia. So I'm trying to find ways that are simpler for other countries to find ways to handle this. So I'll show you a couple of different methods that I've applied here, along with my colleagues from Australia. Some of you may know John Dawson and Gurung Hu. I've been very fortunate to work with some very smart people in Australia and in France, having Zahir come out and teach us. Yeah, I'd be interested in your thoughts in the different approaches here and advice you might give us to how we could help other countries as well. So I'll skip over this. This is the example. So the Fiji datum, and it still is today, is WGS72. Yeah, wow. So there's an organisation called SOPAC, and they're like a regional committee who work, or regional organisation who work in the Pacific, and because they don't have a lot of capacity for some of these geospatial technologies, they're focused and they work out of Fiji, but they support 14 different Pacific Island countries. And so they had this challenge of trying to compute transformation parameters to move between WGS72 and something in ITRF so that their data would line up better. So they were going to, and a big part of it, as I mentioned the other day, was around this UN Convention on Law of the Sea. They wanted to have these 18 survey sites on different islands throughout northern Fiji in the same reference frame so that they could submit this data for the Convention of Law of the Sea. So here's sort of the steps that they were guided through by John and Gurung in Australia. And the first thing they had to do was go and observe GNSS marks in which WGS72 coordinates were available. So they had the coordinates already in WGS72. They needed to know what they were in ITRF. So there were 18 stations. They took their dual frequency observations and they did it for 28 days continuously around these different sites around Fiji. So this data came back in to Geoscience Australia, and then they computed the ITRF 2005 coordinates at that 2008 epoch. And they used the 5 IGS stations from the surrounding area as part of the analysis process, and it also included Pacific Island regional sites to try and improve the quality of the reference frame. So here's the different numbers, and you don't need to read the numbers, it's not important. What I wanted to show is the colours really, and just focus on the orange ones. Excuse me. So if you look at the orange ones on the right-hand side, those are the ones where they are also available in WG72. There's a number of extra sites they observed on the right-hand side for another purpose, but those ones in orange or yellow, as you see it, are the ones that are listed that they had in WG72. So these can become the common data set. The bit in red is just because the information was flipped. There's an error in the report, so that's for me to remind John and Gurung to correct. Computing the transformation parameters. As I mentioned before, if you've got the WGS72 coordinates in XYZ, and then you've got the new coordinates you're trying to capture, you've got both of those sets of data. So then you're running your inversion process to solve for the translation components, the scale factor, and the rotations. So you need at least 3 common points, but as we know, the more you have, the better for redundant observations in this least squares adjustment process. and the translation, the scale, and the rotation. I won't take you through the details. We've covered that enough. So how does it work? Well, you solve for this linearized system. So you set up your system of equations, then have your design matrix and your unknown parameters, and then importantly, you iteratively solve. It's an inversion problem. So you've got to iterate, iterate, iterate. And then you've got to verify. So you can use the computed parameters to transform to the original coordinates, and then you can compare the residuals that you see left over. As I've said at the bottom, the way that John and Gurung did this in Australia was using CatRef. There's also other ways you could do it with proprietary software, or, and this is the bit I wanted to talk to you about, you can try and use AI. I'm hoping Zahir doesn't fall off his seat.
No. So AI will replace CatRef, right?
Just wait, we'll see. I want you to tell me if it will replace CatRef. So here is the information, and if you feed these two different data sets into, I used a version of AI, and I asked the AI to write me a Python script that would compute the transformation parameters between WGS72 and ITRF 2005. And the first couple of times I asked it to do it, it got close, but it had some problems. So it goes to show you need to know how to train the AI. You can't just ask it any simple question and it's going to give you the right answer. I also had the benefit of knowing what the answer was already, which helps. But what it does allow you to do is think about how could you work with someone and provide guidance to them so that they could think about doing this kind of work in a way that's not quite as scary as it might be if you had never used CatRef before. So we've got our WGS72 coordinates we fed in on the left and the ITRF coordinates on the right-hand side. And we said, all right, let's go and compute our transformation parameters. So if we start by looking at the results on the right-hand side, these were the results that were produced through CatRef by John and Gurung, highly qualified geodesists, trained in CatRef, and they've come up with translation, scale factor, and rotations. And there's the residuals. If they do that verification step, you can see the residuals are 0.98, 0.86, and 0.8. That's a pretty good result for what they were looking for this law of the sea convention, because the results didn't need to be overly accurate. You're talking about defining things at, arc-second level for information that goes into law of the sea convention. So that was more than adequate for what they needed for that transformation. On the left-hand side, you can see the AI results once it had had a couple of steps of training. And as you can see, if you jump straight to the bottom, the RMS residuals were 0.88, 1.0, and 0.75. So they're in the same range. And if you have, the interesting thing is if you look at the rotations are going in different directions. And as Zahir will know, this is an Australian problem, that you can either rotate coordinates around the frame or the frame around the coordinates. And even if you ask me, I think the Australians do it the wrong way, right?
Well, it is a question of convention.
It's convention. Yeah, you're being polite. The Australians do it wrong.
Yeah.
So all the difference is here is the way that it's reported from an Australian report. If you actually look at the mathematics, it's done the same way. We just report the rotation conventions a different way. And this has caused me no end of headaches. So here's the Python script that ultimately I got an AI bot to develop. And to do that transformation, to compute those transformation parameters. And I just think it's just something to think about, and I'd really be interested in your thoughts in, this is a way to generate a bit of discussion around how AI is getting used in the geodetic community. I hear a lot about the words quantum, AI, ML in Geodesy, but I haven't seen a lot of things that are being done to apply it and use it, and in particular help solve this capacity problem, because we increasingly suffer from a lack of capacity. Do we think tools like this could be helpful to try and address these kind of capacity problems in the future, if we have qualified people who are helping to train the AI and then make this information available to a broader community? So with that, that's the end of the presentation. Zahir is still sitting in his chair. That's a win for me. And I just wanted to have a bit of a discussion about, what are you using in terms of AI? Are any of you teaching AI and geodesy at uni or using it in your workplace? I'd be really interested to get your thoughts on that. And obviously, if you do have some of that technology, if you can make it available to us to share with other developing countries, I think that would be really useful. So with that, I'll stop and open the floor. Thank you.